50 unforgettable images that will absolutely blow your mind. Contestants in a contest for the most beautiful legs, taken in the 1940s. A Hitler Youth commander inspecting the girls on her team in 1935. American girls in bathing suits enjoying a sunny weekend on a Washington beach in the 1920s. A captured German Taube monoplane on display at the Invalides in Paris in 1915. An early World War I aircraft, later replaced by newer designs. Participants in the first Miss Universe contest in 1952. Contestants of a beauty contest at a national tobacco festival, posed nude behind a large walnut barrel in Boston, United States during the 1930s. A hip massage machine being demonstrated in the United States around 1928. An Arab man with his 3 wives and 2 servants, captured in Egypt in 1870. American industrialist and inventor Henry Ford posing with his first car in New York City in 1910. Contestants in a beach beauty pageant held in Florida in the 1930s, with burlap sacks over their heads so their bodies alone would be judged. The little man at a family party in Rio Grande do Sul, Brazil, during the 1940s. Workers loading coffee at the port of Santos, São Paulo in the 1900s. A German soldier demonstrating the massive design of a rapid-firing railway gun during World War I in 1918. Call girls posing at a Paris brothel in 1910. A lazy man with his invention, the mobile goat, in the United States in 1886. A lady posing with the same smile in the same place. 71 years apart. A milkman turned bagpiper named Harry Luna entering the battlefield in 1914 during World War I. Despite enemy fire, his playing boosted troop morale. A Canadian soldier comforting a wounded Belgian baby, whose mother had been killed by an artillery shell during World War I in November 1918. A zebra-drawn carriage on the streets of London in 1900. The hull of a ship being repaired in dry dock in France in 1890. 2 French girls collaborating with German soldiers during the Nazi occupation of France. One wears a German soldier's hat in May 1942. 2 ladies enjoying tea outside their thatched cottages in the Scottish Highlands in 1902. A young couple cuddling behind the wheel of their convertible as they watch a film at a drive-in cinema in the United States during the 1930s. A man using a water cart to sprinkle the streets of London Borough in 1877. Passengers strolling on the deck of the Titanic on April 11, 1912. The Empire State Building, towering over New York City during its early days, standing out against a skyline that was largely low-rise at the time. The face of a Soviet soldier before and after serving 4 years on the front lines during World War II. From 1941 to 1945, an Italian pasta shop bustling with activity in 1865. A police officer reprimanding a man in San Francisco, United States, for not wearing a mask during the 1918 flu pandemic. 2 men posing next to a Coca-Cola delivery truck in 1910. A 14-year-old Osama bin Laden standing on the far right with friends during his schooling in Oxford in the 1970s. 2 young girls wearing miniskirts, a fashionable trend at the time, in Cape Town in 1965. A ship under construction in London in 1900. A French woman having her head shaved by civilians as punishment for collaborating with Nazis during the occupation of France from 1940 to 1944. People going about their daily lives on a street in Rio de Janeiro in the 1920s. Pedro Borges Street in Fortaleza, Brazil, in February 1935. Soldiers of the Brazilian Expeditionary Force in Italy during World War II, sending a defiant message to Hitler in 1944. Contestants of the first Miss America pageant posing in swimsuits in 1921. The winner is the third from the left. A girl running along the sand on a beach in London, England, during the 1930s. The Italian inventor Davide Slade testing his one-wheeled motorcycle in the 1930s. An exotic dancer demonstrating her oversized underwear to undercover police officers in Florida, United States, during the 1980s. President Juscelino Kubitschek at the May 1st celebrations in Brasilia in 1959. Avenida Afonso Pena in Belo Horizonte during the third year of the founding of Minas Gerais capital. In 1900, American Betty Page, one of the most iconic models of the 1950s. American girls by the pool listening to music on a battery-powered radio in the 1940s. Native men of the Pacific Northwest coast of Canada, dressed in ceremonial attire in 1914. A soldier saying goodbye to his wife at a New York train station before leaving for World War II. A demonstration in Rio de Janeiro on June 30th, 1942, demanding Brazil's entry into World War II after Axis forces bombed Brazilian ships. The start of the kilometer drag racing championship held in Barra da Tijuca, Rio de Janeiro. In the 1960s, the infamous couple of robbers, Bonnie and Clyde, in March 1933. The photo was discovered in their abandoned hideout. A drunk man being carried home in a basket after being thrown out of a bar in Istanbul, Turkey, during the 1960s. A crowd watching a boxing match at Campo de Santana, Rio de Janeiro, in the 1930s. People boarding a tram in downtown Rio de Janeiro in July 1933. French women enjoying a swim in the sea during the 1920s. Martha Rocha, Miss Brazil, becoming Vice Miss Universe in the United States in 1954. American girls posing for a group photo by the sea in the 1950s. U.S. President Gerald Ford showing off his soccer skills with Pelé in 1975. The gigantic propellers of the Titanic with their creators in 1911. Rua 15 de Novembro in Blumenau, Santa Catarina, at the beginning of the 20th century. Urban traffic chaos in Sweden on the day they switched from driving on the left to the right side of the road in September 1967. A police officer helping a little boy cross the street during a parade in Washington in the 1950s. A Protestant Christian with a sign against bathing suits on a beach in Florida, United States, during the 1980s. The sign warns of hell. Contestants from New Zealand fainting during the Miss Universe contest in 1954. The winner of a beauty contest in Brighton, southern England, in the 1920s. The famous cangaceiro Lampião and his wife, Maria Bonita, in the Brazilian Northeast during the 1930s. The Arcos da Lapa in Rio de Janeiro in the 1950s. A couple on a tandem bicycle in front of the White House in Washington in 1886. William Harley and Arthur Davidson displaying their first Harley-Davidson motorcycles in 1914. Workers painting the Eiffel Tower in 1932. The facade of the Pathé Palace Cinema in downtown Rio de Janeiro, advertising the movie The Sea Dog in 1931. A cold and snowy day in London during the 1950s. An elephant seal with its keeper at a Paris zoo in 1936.